The camera couldn't see through rain. Karen Doyle said, smiling as if she had already won. And even if it could, that angle never showed my face. That was the moment I knew she had studied the footage. Across the courtroom, 72-year-old Walter Briggs held a silver key fob in both hands. Karen's attorney stopped turning pages. Karen believed darkness had hidden her. The camera did not need to see her face. It saw what she carried. Before I take you deeper into this case, make sure you are subscribed for more powerful courtroom stories like this. Comment below with where you are watching from, and stay with me because this case turned on a 3-second reflection Karen never noticed. Walter was suing Karen for damage to his bakery, cash taken from a locked drawer, and the destruction of a handwritten recipe book that belonged to his late wife. Helen Karen denied entering the building. She claimed Walter blamed her because she had opened a competing cafe nearby, but this case was never really about a broken door or missing money. It was about memory. Walter and Helen had run Briggs Bakery for 41 years. She created every original recipe by hand and kept them in a red cloth notebook tied with black ribbon. After Helen died, Walter stopped making 3 of her most popular pastries. He told me he could not bring himself to open the notebook. Grief does not always destroy an object. Sometimes it makes the object too important to touch. Karen had worked for Walter for 6 years. She knew where the notebook was kept, which drawer held the weekend cash, and that the alley camera produced dark images. Walter testified that on a stormy Sunday night, someone entered through the rear door. The lock was not forced. Nearly $3,000 disappeared. So did Helen's notebook. The next morning, flour covered the office floor, equipment was damaged, and the security recorder had been unplugged. Karen's attorney called it random vandalisms. Walter called it targeted. They took only what they came for, he said. I watched Karen when he said the notebook. Her thumb pressed hard against the gold ring on her index finger. Bodies confess before mouths do. I asked when she last entered the bakery. 3 months before the incident. Did you use Walter's recipes? No. Did you ever ask for Helen's notebook? No. Her answers came too quickly. I asked whether she still had a rear door key. No. Walter raised the silver fob. That is the one she returned. It held a brass key with a blue plastic cap. Walter explained there had been 2 rear door keys. The other carried a small engraved H because Helen used it for early deliveries. The H key was missing. Karen laughed. Walter loses things constantly. She was not denying the second key existed. She was attacking the man who remembered it. When someone cannot destroy evidence, they try to weaken the person carrying it. I asked where she was at 10:43 that night. At home. Alone? Yes. Did you leave? No. Did you walk through the alley? No. I displayed the first CCTV image. Rain streaked across the frame. A person in a dark coat walked toward the rear door beneath a clear umbrella. The face was hidden. Karen leaned back. That could be anyone. It could, I said. She smiled. The next image showed a hand reaching toward the lock. The footage was too dark to identify a face. Then I asked whether she owned a clear umbrella. Millions of people do. That was not my question. I have one somewhere. Did you use it that night? No. I zoomed in. Rainwater covered the umbrella. Reflected in the wet plastic was the illuminated cafe sign across the alley. The reflection also captured the person's hand. A gold ring sat on the index finger. It had a flat, dark center crossed by a thin crack. Karen immediately tucked her left hand beneath the table. I told her to place both hands where I could see them. She obeyed slowly. The ring matched the reflection. Her attorney objected that similar rings existed everywhere. A ring alone was not enough. It was only the first rung of the proof ladder. I displayed a photograph Karen had posted online 2 days before the break-in. She stood inside her new cafe beside a tray of pastries. On her finger was the same ring with the same crack. Karen's smile disappeared. You cannot prove that was my ring in the rain. I have not finished. The next frame showed the figure turning toward the door. The face remained hidden, but the key entered the light. The engraved letter H flashed beside the lock. Walter lowered his eyes. Helen's key. Karen shook her head. The footage was enhanced. You can make pixels show anything. Technology does not become dishonest simply because it remembers what someone hoped darkness would forget. I asked whether she had ever possessed the H key. No. Did you know it existed? No. That was a mistake. Earlier, she had spoken confidently about Walter losing bakery keys. Now she claims she never knew Helen's key existed. Then I asked one simple question. Why did you say the camera angle never showed your face? Her attorney closed his eyes. Karen froze. I had never told her which angle the camera captured or whether a face appeared. She had volunteered that knowledge before the footage was shown. How did you know what the camera could not see? I asked. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Liars often rehearse answers. They forget to rehearse the question that proves they already know the evidence. But I was not ready to play the final clip. The ring and the key proved who reached the door. They did not yet prove what happened inside. Karen believed unplugging the recorder erased every interior camera. What she did not know was that one camera had a backup battery and stored 6 minutes of footage inside its own memory. Those 6 minutes showed her entering Walter's office, opening the drawer, and taking Helen's red recipe notebook. But before I revealed that, the court needed to understand why Karen wanted the notebook badly enough to risk everything, and why Walter had brought one sealed envelope that proved the theft began long before the break-in. Walter Briggs met Helen at a church picnic in 1968. She brought cinnamon rolls. He fell in love before learning her last name. 3 years later, they opened Briggs Bakery with one used mixer. The red notebook grew with them. Every failed batch and successful adjustment went into its pages. Butter stained the corners. Helen wrote notes in the margins. Walter likes less nutmeg. Add orange peel at Christmas. Do not rush the dough. That notebook was 40 years of marriage, written in flour, ink, and memory. After Helen died, Walter tied the black ribbon around it and locked it in his office drawer. He could not open it because the first page carried her handwriting from the week they became engaged. I could hear her when I looked at it. He said Walter still arrived at 4:30 every morning. He was not confused. He was disciplined. Karen described him as forgetful and emotionally attached to old things. She wanted the court to treat his memories like clutter. On paper, the claim looked simple. Underneath it was something heavier. Karen had taken the one object Walter had not yet found the courage to read. Karen joined the bakery 6 years earlier and became shift manager. Then receipts disappeared. Ingredient orders changed. Customers began asking why she was selling her own pastries at weekend markets. Helen became suspicious when Karen sold a pear custard round that had never appeared publicly. Its recipe existed only on page 83 of the red notebook. Walter confronted her. Karen called it coincidence. 2 months later, he fired her. She opened a cafe less than a mile away. Soon, Helen's pastries appeared there under new names. Karen changed decoration, but skilled work leaves fingerprints. Walter demanded that she stop using the recipes. 3 weeks later, someone entered the bakery. I asked about the sealed envelope Walter had brought to court. Helen's handwriting covered the front. Open only if Karen ever claims these recipes are hers. Karen looked at it with recognition, not panic. Inside were dated drafts, invoices, test batch photographs, and a signed statement explaining when each pastry was created. The envelope also contained a photograph of Helen beside Karen in the bakery kitchen. The red notebook lay open to page 83 beneath Karen's hand. On the back, Helen had written, "Karen asked to buy this recipe. I said no." Karen's knee began moving beneath the table. Her attorney argued that the photograph proved only access, not theft. That was only the first rung. A second photograph showed Karen holding her phone above the open notebook with the camera application visible. So I displayed Karen's phone backup. One deleted image had been recovered as a thumbnail. It showed page 83, the pear custard recipe. Karen stopped moving her knee. Walter looked at her. "Helen gave you a job," he said. "You stole from her while she stood beside you." Karen leaned toward the microphone. She was sick by then. I asked what Helen's illness had to do with the photograph. She became suspicious. Was she confused? At times. Could she recognize her own handwriting? I didn't say she couldn't. Then she made the mistake people make when they believe a dead witness cannot answer. She barely knew what was happening near the end. Walter lowered his eyes. That was not a defense. It was an attack on Helen's dignity. I had reviewed her medical records. Her illness affected her lungs, not her memory. Her physician documented clear judgment until her final week. Helen prepared the envelope 7 months before she died. Karen did not know I had that record. She had built her story around the belief that death erased the witness, but Helen had preserved dates, photographs, drafts, and one final statement. Truth does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives sealed in an envelope by someone who knew she might not be there to defend it. I asked Walter why he had never opened it. Helen told me not to unless Karen claimed the recipes. She has been claiming them for 2 years. Walter looked at the envelope. I wasn't ready to admit Helen knew this would happen. That was the emotional center of the case. Walter was grieving the fact that Helen spent part of her final year protecting him from someone they trusted. I asked what he found after the break-in. The rear door was closed but unlocked. The office drawer stood open. The cash and red notebook were gone. Flour covered the floor. 2 mixer controls were smashed, and the security recorder had been unplugged. Karen's Cafe opened that same morning with a sign. 3 classic Briggs favorites, now improved. She called the timing coincidence. Coincidence becomes less convincing when it requires a key, a copied recipe, a disabled recorder, and a missing notebook. Walter showed me a locksmith's receipt. 6 months before Karen was fired, Helen changed the rear lock. The receipt listed 3 keys, one for Walter, one for Helen. One temporary copy for Karen. Karen claimed she returned hers. But the CCTV showed Helen's engraved H key opening the door. That meant someone either took Helen's key or copied it. I asked when the H key disappeared. The week Helen entered hospice. Walter said, "Who was helping at the house?" He looked toward Karen. She was. Karen's attorney said no evidence placed her inside the office. The exterior camera ended at the rear door, but Karen had unplugged only the main recorder. One office camera had its own battery and stored 6 minutes internally. Karen still did not know that. Before I played it, I wanted her denials clear. Did you enter the bakery that Sunday? No. Did you unplug the recorder? No. Did you open the cash drawer? No. Did you take Helen's notebook? No. 4 answers. 4 clean lines for the evidence to cross. Then Karen looked at Walter and said, "You are using your dead wife because you cannot accept that my cafe succeeded where yours failed." Walter's eyes closed. I watched the insult land. Karen believed she had reduced him. What she did not understand was that her sentence gave me the final reason to stop waiting. I turned toward the clerk. The office camera file was ready. And in the first frame, Karen was not wearing the dark coat from the alley. She was wearing Helen's old red bakery apron. The first frame showed Karen standing inside Walter's office in Helen's red bakery apron. Not something similar, the apron. A faded strawberry was stitched above the pocket. Helen had worn it in photographs for 20 years. Walter kept it hanging behind the office door after her death. Karen tied it around her waist and smiled at her reflection in the window. That smile told me more than the missing money did. She was not simply stealing. She was rehearsing ownership. Walter did not look angry. He looked wounded in a quieter place. Some thefts removed property. Others tried to replace the person who created it. The footage showed Karen crossing to the desk and using a brass key. The drawer opened immediately. She removed the red notebook, held it against the apron, and turned toward the camera. Then she froze. For 1 second, she looked directly into the lens. Her face was clear. Karen's attorney challenged the timestamp and the emotional impact of the clothing. Then I asked Karen whether she still believed the camera never showed her face. She said nothing. Her attorney whispered, "Do not answer." Karen ignored him. That could have been recorded any time. Were you authorized to wear Helen's apron? No. To open Walter's desk? No. To take the notebook? She looked at Walter. He owed me. There it was. The denial became entitlement. When evidence closes every exit, people often reveal the belief that brought them into the room. Karen did not think she had stolen because she believed she deserved what she took. "Why did Walter owe you?" I asked. "For making that bakery profitable. Helen wrote things in a notebook, but I made them valuable." The courtroom went still. She had spent the morning claiming she never wanted the recipes. Now she was claiming she had earned them. I asked whether she owned any part of the bakery. No. Did Helen sell you the recipes? No. Did any agreement give them to you? No. Then what gave you the right to take them? Karen leaned back. Without me, that place would have died. Walter's fingers tightened around the key fob. He had trusted her and allowed her into his home while Helen was dying. Karen converted kindness into access. At Briggs Bakery, Karen improved displays, online ordering, and supplier management. So did her sense of ownership. Customers began asking whether she owned the bakery. She never corrected them. Helen did. That began their conflict. Helen respected Karen's skill, but refused to sell the notebook or transfer ownership. Karen treated those boundaries like insults. After Walter fired her, Karen told former co-workers she would prove who had really carried the old place. She opened a polished cafe nearby. Soon Helen's pastries appeared there under new names. Privately, Karen kept asking former employees where Walter stored the red notebook. One employee, Melissa Grant, saved the messages. Karen wrote, "Does the old man still keep the red book in the office?" 2 days later, "I only need it for one night." "He will never know." Karen called the messages jokes. Jokes are useful shelters. People retreat into them after revealing intent. I asked why she needed the notebook. "I didn't." "You wrote that you did." I was being sarcastic. About taking a dying woman's recipes. Karen's face hardened. She was not dead when I wrote that. The gallery reacted. Her attorney covered his eyes. I asked quietly, "Does that make it better?" Karen looked away. The video resumed. She removed the cash, then used a spray bottle on the desk handle, drawer pull, and door lock. She was wiping away fingerprints. Then she unplugged the main recorder. She believed the office camera died with it. She struck 2 mixer controls with a flour scoop and scattered flour across the floor. The vandalism was staged. Random damage creates a random story, but she protected the notebook while destroying everything around it. She wrapped it in a clean plastic bag before placing it in her tote. That showed purpose. The cash was secondary. The recipes were the target. Before leaving, Karen removed Helen's apron, folded it carefully, and placed it beside the notebook. Walter whispered. She took that too. His voice broke for the first time. Karen looked at him. It was just fabric. To Walter, that apron carried 40 years of mornings beside his wife. It was not fabric. It was a life. I asked where it was. I threw it away. Walter closed his eyes. I asked where the notebook was. I don't know. You carried it out. I left it somewhere. Where? I don't remember. Memory had become convenient again. I asked whether she copied the recipes. No. Photographed them? No. Scanned them? No. Gave them to anyone? No. Her answers became rhythmic again. Rehearsed, but her cafe records told another story. Three days after the break-in, Karen's kitchen printer produced 47 recipe sheets. Each matched Helen's handwritten structure, same ingredient order. Same unusual measurements, same private notes turned into typed instructions. One sheet even included Helen's phrase, "Do not rush the dough." Karen called it common advice. Walter looked at me. Helen wrote that on everything. It was not just an instruction, it was her voice. Karen copied the recipes so completely that she copied the parts no thief would recognize as personal. That was her mistake. I asked whether her cafe had cameras. Yes. Were they operating after the break-in? Yes. Did they record you bringing in the notebook? No. Are you certain? Yes. Did they record Helen's apron? No. Another pair of absolute answers. I reached for the second evidence folder. Karen watched my hand. For the first time, fear replaced anger. Her cafe's own camera had recorded her at 12:14 a.m., less than 2 hours after the break-in. She entered through the side door carrying the red notebook and wearing Helen's apron, but she was not alone. A man was waiting inside. Karen had claimed she barely knew him. The video showed him opening the notebook and removing a sealed page from the back cover. Walter had never seen that page. It did not contain a recipe. It contained Helen's proof that Karen's theft had started years before the break-in. The man waiting inside Karen's cafe was Thomas Reed. Karen had described him as a casual supplier. The video showed otherwise. Thomas locked the side door, opened Helen's notebook, and went directly to the back cover. He did not search. He knew where the hidden page was. Karen stood beside him wearing Helen's apron as he removed a folded sheet from the back cover. Walter whispered, "I never knew that was there." He told me Helen sometimes hid test recipes inside the notebook and had warned that Karen was copying more than recipes. She froze. I asked who Thomas Reed was. A wholesale representative. Did he help you open the cafe? No. Did he invest money? No. Did he help copy Walter's business records? No. 3 clean denials. I displayed a state registration record. Thomas owned a consulting company formed 2 weeks before Karen left Briggs Bakery. It paid the deposit on her cafe lease and received transfers from an account Karen controlled. Walter's records showed 14 payments to TR Services totaling $26,400. Thomas controlled TR Services. Karen approved every payment. The theft had begun while Helen was alive. I returned to the cafe video. Thomas unfolded the hidden page. Karen pointed to one paragraph and said, "That is what has to disappear." Her voice was clear. I asked what she meant. "I don't know what page that was. You pointed to a paragraph." I could have been pointing at anything. The video continued. Thomas read aloud. Karen Doyle authorized payments from Briggs Bakery to TR. Services for work never performed. I have copied the checks and bank records. Walter stared at her. Helen had documented the scheme herself. The page listed check numbers, dates, and Thomas's company. It ended with one sentence. "If Walter finds this after I am gone, he must know I stayed silent because I was gathering proof." The courtroom changed. Karen had described Helen as confused, but the statement was organized with the precision of someone preparing for a fight she might not live to finish. Karen shook her head. "She hated me." "No," Walter said. "She saw you." Karen turned toward him. "You let her blame me because you were too afraid to run the business yourself." Walter did not look away. You stole while she was dying. That was resentment, not defense. Karen believed Walter's grief made him undeserving of what he owned. I asked what happened to the hidden page. She said she did not know. The video answered. Thomas placed it in a metal mixing bowl. Karen poured alcohol over it and struck a match. On the screen, Helen's proof curled and blackened, but Karen made another mistake. The camera captured the page before the flame reached it. Digital enhancement recovered enough detail to compare it with copies inside Helen's sealed envelope. The wording, check numbers, and signature matched. Karen destroyed the original, but not the truth. I asked, "Why burn a page you claim meant nothing?" Karen looked at her attorney. He told me it contained private information. Whose? I don't remember. Why were you wearing Helen's apron? It was raining. That is not an answer. I grabbed it without thinking. You entered Walter's office, took his wife's notebook, removed cash, disabled cameras, staged vandalism, and burned a hidden statement. Which part happened without thinking? She had no answer, but she still had arrogance. Even if I took the notebook, those recipes made my business, she said. Walter was wasting them. Her attorney whispered. Stop, Karen continued. Helen wrote ideas. I turned them into something people wanted. Walter lowered his eyes. That was the deepest cruelty in the case. She wanted him to believe Helen's work had value only because Karen used it. People who exploit creators often convince themselves profit turns theft into ownership. I asked whether success gave her the right to take property. I earned those recipes. How? By making them profitable. So profit makes stolen property yours. That is not what I said. It is exactly what you said. Karen turned toward the gallery. This is emotional theater. An apron and a dead woman's handwriting do not prove I stole money. She was right about one thing. The emotional proof was not the final rung. So I reached for the bank records. Before I opened them, I addressed the viewers. If Karen's own words have exposed her, comment proof below. The next document showed she planned the break-in before the camera recorded her. I displayed a transfer dated 2 days before the burglary. Karen sent Thomas $4,500. The memo line read, night pickup and cleanup. Her attorney argued it could refer to supplies. Then I displayed text messages recovered from Thomas's phone, Karen. Sunday. Walter will be home. Thomas. Alarm? Karen. Old system. Kill the recorder. Thomas. What about the alley camera? Karen. Rain will blind it. It never gets faces. The exact language Karen used in court. Her confidence had not come from guessing. It came from planning. Thomas replied, need the H key. Karen answered, already copied. Walter closed his eyes. Karen had made a duplicate of Helen's key. I asked where it was. Karen said nothing. The clerk placed a clear evidence bag on my bench. Inside was a brass key engraved with the letter H. Police recovered it from Thomas's apartment beside black ribbon matching the notebook and a locksmith receipt dated 3 days before the break-in. The key matched the door. The payment matched the plan. The messages matched Karen's courtroom words. Her attorney requested a recess. I denied it. Then I asked the question she could not answer without destroying what remained of her story. If the camera was too blind to identify you, why did you need Thomas to disable it? Karen stared at me. Her face lost color. I let the question do the work. Her shoulders collapsed. For the first time, she looked toward the exit. The bailiff saw it too. I reached for the final evidence file. Inside was Thomas Reed's recorded statement. He had stopped protecting Karen. And what he admitted next would reveal why Helen's notebook had not been discarded, why the apron still existed, and why Karen's cafe had been built with money stolen from the bakery she claimed to have saved. Thomas Reed's recorded statement began with a long breath. Then he said, Karen planned the break-in. Thomas said Karen approached him after Helen entered hospice. She told him Walter would never fight publicly because grief had made him easy to manage. That phrase mattered. Karen had studied more than the cameras. She had studied the victim. She knew when Walter closed the bakery, where the notebook was kept, and which recorder controlled the visible cameras. She believed grief had made him predictable. Predatory people often mistake pain for weakness. Thomas admitted that his company, TR Services, issued 14 false invoices to Briggs Bakery. No deliveries, no consulting, no equipment. Karen approved the payments and divided the money with him. More than $26,000 disappeared in amounts designed to resemble ordinary business costs. Even the cafe sign reflected in Karen's umbrella had been purchased with Walter's money. Karen stared at Thomas's image. He is saying this to save himself. He admits his part, I said, because he expects immunity. There is no promise of immunity. Her attorney turned toward her. Karen had not known that Thomas explained that Helen wrote the payment numbers inside the red notebook. Disguised as recipe measurements, she had hidden a private audit trail where Karen expected only baking notes. Each number matched a payment to TR Services. Each date matched a withdrawal. The notebook was not only a collection of recipes, it was evidence. That was the hidden truth beneath the break-in. Karen wanted the theft to look like competition between two bakeries. The cash, broken equipment, and stolen recipes were camouflage. Her real target was proof of the money she had already taken. The clerk displayed scanned pages recovered from Thomas's phone. Helen's notes matched the bank records exactly. Walter touched the empty place where the notebook should have been. She knew I would understand the numbers, he said. Karen laughed thinly. She wrote measurements. Then why did Thomas know which page had to disappear, I asked. No answer. Why did your messages mention the H key, the alarm, and the rain? She looked toward her attorney. He did not rescue her. By then, the proof no longer depended on Thomas's word. The key, camera, payment, messages, burned page, and invoices all locked together. Thomas also recorded an argument after the break-in. Karen's voice filled the courtroom. You signed the invoices. If this falls apart, it is your company, not mine. Thomas replied. You approved every payment. Karen said, Walter will believe whatever I tell him. He can barely say his wife's name without crying. Walter closed his eyes. The cruelty was deliberate. Karen had built her plan around his grief. Thomas asked what would happen if Walter reported the notebook stolen. Karen answered, I will say he gave it to me before Helen died. Then I'll make him look confused. When someone cannot erase evidence, they try to erase the witness. Karen claimed the recording was edited. A forensic report confirmed no cuts or alterations. I displayed the digital approval records. Every payment required a manager code. Karen's code appeared on all 14 transactions. One payment was entered at 6:12 a.m. The office camera showed Karen alone at the computer, wearing Helen's red apron. She had worn it while stealing from the bakery months before the break-in. I asked where the notebook was. Thomas said he first hid it inside a flour bin in the cafe basement. Karen later moved it. Then the clerk displayed one final message. Karen wrote, move the book where Walter will never look. Thomas replied, storage room. Karen answered, closer. He sees it every week. Walter looked confused. Then his face changed. Helen's grave. Walter went every Sunday. A cemetery camera showed Karen arriving the morning after the break-in with a rectangular package wrapped in black plastic. She walked behind a low stone wall near Helen's family plot. 12 minutes later, she returned without it. Karen whispered, no. It was the first honest fear I heard from her. Investigators searched behind the memorial bench. They found a weatherproof container. Inside were Helen's red notebook, The black ribbon, the bakery apron, and copies of the false invoices. Karen had buried the evidence beside the woman she tried to discredit. She believed Walter's grief would keep him from looking there. That was cruelty used as strategy. The clerk placed the notebook on the evidence table inside a protective sleeve. Walter stood before I told him to. His hands trembled. The red cloth was stained, but Helen's handwriting, recipes, and financial notes had survived. Walter sat slowly and touched the sleeve with 2 fingers. "You came back," he whispered. He was not speaking only to the notebook. He was speaking to Helen. Karen turned away. The courtroom no longer saw a dispute over pastries. Karen had stolen from 2 people, copied a dying woman's work, and buried the truth beside Helen's grave because she believed sorrow would protect it. I asked whether she had anything truthful to say before I ruled. Her attorney advised her not to answer. Karen ignored him. She looked at Walter and said, "You would have lost that bakery without me." Walter held Helen's notebook against his chest. "No," he said. "I almost lost it because of you." That was the moment Karen's confidence disappeared. Her shoulders dropped. Her hands began to shake. The woman who claimed the CCTV was blind now sat surrounded by images, records, recordings, and the notebook she buried. But one final piece remained. Inside the container, investigators found a small digital recorder wrapped in Helen's apron. Walter had never seen it. Karen had. The device contained Helen's voice from 6 days before her death. She named the missing money. She explained why she hid the check numbers inside recipes. And she described the exact threat Karen made when she realized she had been discovered. The clerk placed the recorder beside the notebook. Karen stared at it as though the dead had returned to testify. I was ready to play Helen's final statement, and once her voice filled that courtroom, Karen would lose the last defense she had left. Helen's voice entered the courtroom low. "My name is Helen Briggs. I am recording this because Karen Doyle knows I discovered the payments." Walter closed his eyes. Helen described the false invoices, copied recipes, and the day she confronted Karen. "She told me Walter would believe her before he believed a sick woman," Helen said. "Then she said she would make people think the illness had reached my mind." Karen stared at the recorder. "I am not confused," Helen continued. "I know what I signed. I know what Karen approved. I know what she took." Then came the sentence that ended Karen's final defense. "If this recording is being played, it means Karen did exactly what I feared she would do." Walter covered his mouth. Karen shook her head. "She hated me." "No," I said. "She documented you." Hatred gives opinions. Evidence gives dates. Payments, keys, messages, and instructions. Helen had left all of them. I found in favor of Walter Briggs on every civil claim before me. I awarded him the stolen cash, damaged equipment, replacement locks, lost income, forensic costs, and losses tied to Karen's false invoices. I ordered Karen to return every copied recipe, photograph, and business document taken from Briggs Bakery. Her cafe was prohibited from using Helen's recipes, handwritten notes, branding, or any product derived from the notebook. But money was not the largest consequence. I directed that the CCTV footage, bank records, recordings, messages, key evidence, and Karen's testimony be forwarded for official review. The evidence raised issues beyond a private dispute: burglary, theft, fraud, destruction of evidence, conspiracy. And the targeting of an elderly widower, Karen's attorney stood. "Your Honor, a referral could destroy her business." I looked at him. Her business was built with stolen money and stolen work. He sat down. Karen leaned toward the microphone. "What happens to my employees?" Even then, she did not ask about Walter. She asked about consequences reaching her. I ordered no direct or indirect contact with Walter, no calls, no messages, no public claim that Helen gave her the recipes. Karen looked at the notebook. That belongs in a museum, not his failing bakery. She still believed value came from whatever she could sell. I answered with the line I wanted her to remember. You saw an old recipe book. He saw the woman whose life you tried to steal. Karen looked away. Walter did not celebrate. Justice does not erase the intrusion or undo the moment grief was used as a weapon. It simply places responsibility where it belonged. The clerk returned Helen's notebook after it was documented. Walter untied the black ribbon. For the first time since Helen died, he opened the cover. The first page carried her cinnamon roll recipe. At the bottom, beneath an old butter stain, Helen had written, Walter says these are why he married me. He is exaggerating, but I will let him. Walter laughed once through his tears. That sound changed the room. For months, Karen had made the notebook represent theft. In Walter's hands, it became marriage again. Within 24 hours, Karen's Cafe removed the classic Briggs favorites from its menu. By the next morning, the doors were locked. Investigators recovered copied recipes, invoice templates, and records from other businesses where Karen had worked. Former employees described the same method. Gain trust, copy the work, question the owner's memory, then claim the business would have failed without her. Karen's public image collapsed. Customers learned her most popular products came from a dying woman's notebook. The reflected ring from the CCTV image spread online beside one sentence. The camera did not need her face. Walter refused interviews. He did not want Helen's work turned into another spectacle. He reopened Briggs Bakery 1 week later. A line formed around the block. He placed Helen's red apron inside a glass frame near the register. Beneath it, he displayed a card, created by Helen Briggs. Protected by the truth, Walter photographed every page and stored secure copies. He also brought back the pastries he stopped making after Helen's death. The first was the pear custard round Karen had copied. Walter followed Helen's notes exactly. Less sugar, more orange peel. Do not rush the dough. When the first tray came out, he placed one pastry beside her photograph. Rituals allow love to occupy ordinary space. Months later, Walter sent the court a photograph. He stood behind the counter on what would have been his 50th wedding anniversary. Helen's apron hung behind him. The red notebook rested beside cinnamon rolls. The engraved H key was attached to Walter's silver fob again. He no longer used it in the door. He kept it as a reminder. Karen believed the key represented access. Walter decided it represented proof. I remember Karen Doyle because she revealed her guilt before the first video played. The camera couldn't see through rain. She knew the weather. She knew the angle. She knew the face was hidden. And she believed those facts made her invisible. But truth does not always need a perfect view. Sometimes it needs a cracked ring reflected in plastic, a key flashing beneath a light. A dying woman who leaves records behind, and a widower who decides his memory deserves protection. Walter entered my courtroom holding a key fob and carrying the shame of trusting the wrong person. He left with Helen's notebook, his name restored, and the knowledge that grief had not made him weak. It had made him careful with what remained. Karen entered believing CCTV had failed. She left understanding that cameras are not the only things that remember. Bank records remember. Moss remember. Objects remember. And people remember what was done to them, even when someone insists they should forget. If this case reminded you that small evidence can expose a carefully planned lie, like this video, subscribe for more courtroom stories where arrogance finally meets accountability. Share it with someone who believes another person's work and memories deserve protection. Then comment below. At what moment did you know Karen's story had collapsed because she thought the camera could not see her, but justice only needed to see enough?